Hello. Let's quickly address what happened last week before getting into today's episode. So, as you know, Dear Hollywood is entirely independently written by my mind and produced out of my own personal pocket. So, the material hasn't been touched by any outside entities. Well, last week an opportunity came up to bring on the first sponsor. And from the outside, it appeared to be deeply aligned. I knew therapists who'd partnered with this company. I had some entertainment peers who'd collaborated with them. And then my friends and I had personally been customers. And coincidentally, they were all positive experiences. Well, after hitting post, a number of comments brought up some real concerns that were not in my awareness. So I immediately did research, I notified my team, and I spoke to the brand directly to see what they had to say. First, I want to own my ignorance for not being more informed. Second, the brand responded, and take this as you wish. They said, in regards to the FTC settlement around patients' data, at no time have any members' names or clinical data from therapy sessions ever been shared with advertisers, publishers, social media platforms, or other similar third parties. If you want, you can research this more on their privacy policy. I'll link that below. And apparently, they've also since gotten certified by HITRUST, which I guess is the highest level of information protection. So that's their response. Third, I want to reiterate that this podcast and the mission behind it are sacred, and I don't want to do anything to jeopardize the trust and credibility. I know that some people have decided to disavow the podcast and my channel altogether. However, I know many of you are up for growing together, humanizing each other, having nuanced and difficult conversations, so I want to focus our energy there moving forward. Lastly, the reality is, as a content creator, in order to keep this podcast going and cover the expenses, help it reach more people for free, I do need to have sponsors. I'm actually going to dedicate a few episodes to brand deals and social media in a few weeks, and I hope you'll find it to be illuminating. But for now, know that I am truly doing my best to be thoughtful. There are certainly imperfections and complexities along the way, so I appreciate your understanding. Oh, and for those who are passionate about finding good sponsors, please comment ideas of who you feel would fit well. It doesn't mean they'll want to sponsor this, but we could at least try. So comment below and enjoy the episode. Well, enjoyment is arbitrary with these themes. Let me know your thoughts about today's episode. Dear Hollywood, the psychology and aftermath of auditions. Dear Hollywood, now that I've painted an overview of the industry lifestyle, I'm going to hyper-focus on specific, unique, fascinating experiences and the psychological impact they have on young artists. And no, I'm not holding back. Today's target, the audition room. First of all, if you thought you were going to Hollywood to act on film sets and attend red carpet premieres, I have some news. The majority of your time and energy, if you're lucky enough to be selected, will actually be spent commuting across town, plugging parking meters, and finding hole-in-the-wall rooms to audition in front of casting directors. In fact, there's a saying that auditioning is actually the job, booking a role is the vacation. I learned that around 8, ironically, when I booked the role during my family's actual first vacation to Hawaii. So they went, and I stayed in LA on my own week-long vacation filming a television pilot. Today, we are going to examine the audition process before, during, and after. Brace yourselves because it's about to be a psychological roller coaster. We'll cover what it's like to get into character and out of character, if you remember to get out of character, to portray intense scenes, and the deeper ways the audition process influences a young person's development. To start, though, I have to give you these statistics. One mathematician estimated that the likelihood of becoming famous as an English-speaking actor is 0.00041. Every year, there are hundreds of thousands of actors who flock to the industry to pursue their dreams. The chances of becoming as famous as Lindsay Lohan? One in approximately 1.5 million. Your chances of being struck by lightning, however, 1 in about 15,000 here in the US. Financially, if you are assuming that you will become rich and famous, it's important for you to know that only 2% of actors can actually make a living, and 90% are out of work at any given time, according to Queen Mary University in London. The UK has the best actors, so I've heard. So, now with those statistics, let's talk about what it takes for someone to get an audition. Because you don't just show up and go out for roles. There's a number of steps that typically include training, so you know what you're doing. And by the way, this will usually cost hundreds to thousands of dollars. Getting professional headshots taken, another several $100s. Creating a resume of your training and your special skills and existing credits. Wait, you mean you have to show up already having booked work even though you're just getting started? Yeah, sometimes, whether that's community theater or local radio ads or student films. Next, you have to research and set up meetings with agencies who are usually already full of clients, and you'll likely only be able to get into smaller, less powerful agencies up front because they'll be willing to work with newbies, which means they also might not be able to access the bigger projects, but you got to start somewhere. If the interview process goes smoothly and one of them wants to sign you, you'll onboard with them. They may potentially have you film or edit a demo reel of your existing work, or give a sample audition so they can send this to casting. Now, this is all coming out of your wallet, renting the space, working with an acting coach on material, buying the outfits, paying for people to record and edit. And now the game begins. Kind of. Let's talk about the pre-audition. The studio financing a film will hire a casting team to find the actors. This casting team first reviews the script to identify and describe what roles there are. And then after, they reach out to agents, managers, and casting services with this list of roles. From there, agents and managers gather which clients they believe could fit the character description and performance criteria, and they submit a mini catalog of headshots, resumes, demo reels. So casting receives hundreds, if not thousands, of submissions to comb through. And their job is to consolidate this to as few as 25, maybe even just 10 candidates per role. It really kind of depends on the production budget, the timeline, etc. Now, casting might already have a couple hints at the direction they want to go. And first, the executive team might already have an offer-only list, and these are name actors who they're really trying to attach as the stars. These people get the scripts first. Have no fear, if all of them say no, casting has a second line of defense known as the shortlist. The shortlist is literally a short list of known working actors who are talented and trustworthy to get the job done. If you're in good standing with this casting team, or they've hired you before, they may add you into the mix even if your headshot wasn't originally submitted. So, let's say the offer-onlys and the shortlist brigade all fall through. Then casting will sift through the rest of them, that huge pile of submissions, to bring in a handful of people for a first audition. So all of that is happening while you're crossing your fingers as a completely unknown aspiring actor with few credits to receive an audition. If and when that glorious email comes in, be prepared to drop everything you're doing to say yes. The industry is anything but accommodating to your schedule. In fact, most actors aren't able to have full-time jobs or be in regular school settings because auditioning alone causes them to abruptly call out, ask for time off, change shifts. Generally, you receive a couple pages of the script in advance to prepare. Sometimes you only have a day to memorize lines and to get coached and to rearrange your schedule. And though you might invest 5 hours into preparing, driving there, waiting your turn, and driving home, the audition is likely only going to last a few minutes. Yeah, it's that absurd. So let's say you've arrived at the audition location. You've meandered through streets and alleys to find this unmarked door. You've gone up the elevator to the 6th floor, and there you see it. All the other candidates sitting in the waiting room and spilling over into the hallways. Many of the candidates look just like you. After all, there's a character type. Some look nothing like you, and you wonder if they're going for the same role. You approach the sign-in sheet where you write down your name and agency, and your eyes can't help but notice that there are a handful of other people from your agency, which means even if you lose, your agent could win with someone else. Interesting little meta competition. So you look for a place to sit and wait, and you observe everyone in their own process. Some rehearsing their lines methodically, some people with headphones listening to sad music to get into character, some people chatting with friends, and some people conspicuously distracting other candidates so they purposely screw up. Suddenly, you hear someone screaming in the other room next to you, and you realize this is an actor portraying the scene that you're also going to be doing. So now you're listening to all their performance choices. You're hearing how they delivered the lines. You're considering whether you ought to change yours or really double down on your choice to be different. You wait and wait and wait. The person before is in there for 15 minutes and you start wondering if that means they really like them and maybe you should just go home. Deep breaths, focus. Oh, shoot, now your parking meter is running out. Hopefully you don't have a ticket. You always do. And now casting walks into the room, calls your name. It's showtime. In order to maximize your 3 moments in person, there are actual full-on acting schools dedicated purely to perfecting audition technique. From choosing whether you walk into the room as yourself or as the character, to researching the casting director and executive team's previous work to understand the tone and genre and performance they're looking for, to knowing how to slate your name with confidence and clarity, to selecting the right hair, makeup, and wardrobe for the audition. Your first impression is a lasting one. Think about it. Casting is seeing so many people. They want to be able to feel whether or not you could play the part the second you walk into the room. So you better get that performance anxiety in check. And even though you were fired from your part-time job this morning and your cat peed on the carpet and you're nervous about your car being towed or you really have to go to the bathroom, you can't let them see any of that. So I hope you're super good at compartmentalizing. In the room, you will be asked to stand or sit on a certain mark. As you pretend to play out a number of scenarios and emotions, you have to make all of that fit within the camera framing and the positioning because you're likely going to be filmed. As you read, someone from the casting team is assigned to be a reader, or the person who will act with you and play the other roles. Don't get excited. They frequently don't know anything about acting, and they give you very little to work with. So after you do your initial read, casting may give you an adjustment to see if you can take direction and explore other ways of bringing the character and scene to life. Be prepared to take direct criticism well and immediately. After you complete the audition, you are dismissed to leave and collect your parking ticket. I don't know about you, but after the adrenaline spike of performing, there's usually a come down period where I'm replaying everything that just happened. I'm wondering if they liked it. I'm wondering if I'll get a callback. This is when some industry veterans will say it's important to finish the audition and just completely let it go as if it never happened. Unless you get a callback, you basically don't want to dwell too long or it'll just eat you alive. If you receive a callback, though, you may go back into the same location for the next round. Some jobs have up to 8 or more rounds, and each time you're performing in front of more executives, and the competition steepens as fewer people vie for the role. If you're fortunate enough to be one of the finalists, you might be pinned or put on a veil, which means they begin checking your availability to see if you're free when they're filming to portray this role. Helpful hint, whatever else you had planned, cancel it. The assumption is that you wouldn't audition if you didn't intend to be available to film. So make that happen, no matter what family reunion you're going to miss. Now, it should be said that in these later stages of callbacks, you might start doing chemistry reads where you're paired with actors who are trying out for different roles just to see how you play off of each other. If you're auditioning for new TV series during what's called pilot season, you would have to do a round of testing with the studio executives and network, where a bunch of people in suits stare at you while you perform. And before you even go into the testing room, they make you sign contracts for the terms you'd have if you got hired. Meaning, before you even get the job, you see your potential weekly salary. You see the ways in which the company is going to own your name and likeness. You see all this other legal jargon. You better hope that you know how to read legal clauses, or that you have a team who's negotiating in your best interest, because a lot of bad things can happen at this seemingly innocent and exciting final stage of auditioning. It's like seeing your potential future flash before your eyes. It's so full of promise, financial stability, career growth, and then you still may not get the part. Ugh, are you exhausted? Same. But if you do book, congratulations! You can calculate this into your audition to booking ratio, so you can see on average how many auditions and callbacks it takes for you to book a job. You may find that you have a better booking ratio for one genre over another, such as commercials, or horror films, or sitcoms. Or perhaps you tend to book things for characters in high school, but rarely for characters who are in college. By the way, many agents keep an eye on this booking ratio, so if you're not showing any signs of promise, you may be dropped as a client. So, no pressure. Keep in mind, it's said to expect to audition 200 times before you book a job. So, if you just want to pause and do the math on how much money, time, energy you're spending on training, coaching, gas, clothing, skipping other paid work, all in hopes of one day booking a job that pays a couple $100. And because you're new, the early jobs likely aren't going to make up even a fraction of what's been invested. So, deep breath. That's an overview of the audition process. Who wants to act? Anyone? So I told you it's going to be a roller coaster. Unfortunately, it's not over. Now it's time to unpack how all of this might shape a young person's development, starting with what happens when kids can't separate their character from themselves. Identity crisis loading in 3, 2... Stop what you're doing. On the count of 3, create a fantasy world where you're a military veteran who became a circus clown, and your estranged teenage daughter just showed up to discuss that she's pregnant and she needs you to pay for her abortion. 1, 2, 3, action! What? You need more time to get into character? Once you're in the audition, you have to be in the zone, and you've only got a few seconds to win them over. Even if you're 8 years old. It takes a lot of energy to manipulate your mind, body, and emotions into different states. And then to memorize scenes as different people. And then perform them on cue in high-stakes circumstances. There are many, many methods, though, that can help you with this. Some actors use a series of questions to access their subconscious mind to prepare for their audition. Some practice the physical gestures and expressions that will communicate their internal state of being. Some access personal memories to trigger really honest emotions. Some will stay in character the whole day. Some actors rehearse very specific choices for every single beat in a scene, whereas others focus on being so present and listening so deeply that they'll organically respond to external stimuli in a fresh way every run-through. Some actors recite lines word for word, others come from improv backgrounds, and some actors will tell you it's all about the objective. Regardless of your method, it requires energy, malleability, and vulnerability, and you don't get to choose when you're in the mood to do it. This is your job, 24/7. Each actor tends to find out their best method for auditioning over time. Now, as a kid, I created a habit of learning lines and designing my own first draft of a performance alone. Then, with my acting coach, I'd workshop ideas and I'd rehearse until solid choices were made and this imaginary universe was a little more tangible. But I'd hold back from 100% emotional commitment so I could save the full catharsis for the audition. There's nothing like crossing your fingers that your tears are going to explode at just the right moment. I would then use the drive to the audition as the beginning of my emotional contortion, reviewing the full scenes and transitions between them, strengthening memorization through repetition. And, some kids run lines with parents, but it didn't take long before I found a solo groove. Then, once I got to the waiting room, that's when I would start slipping into the emotional state more deeply and, also managing the onset of nerves and comparing myself to my peers. But once there was only 1 to 2 people before me, I'd go full immersion mode into the head space and heart space. I'd rid myself of all distractions as best as I could, especially by the other kids whose parents told them to try and break my focus. So when they called my name, I would snap back to my Alyson identity just long enough to say, "Hello, thanks for having me." Then I instantly returned to the character's universe, and I stayed there, even as I was given notes after they called cut. It always felt like such a raw and vulnerable state, and a good audition was like magic. A bad audition was like the end of the world because you'd put in so much for it to go south. Post-audition, I usually had racing thoughts and anxiety and eventually tiredness, but I admit it wasn't until getting out of the industry that I learned about the concept of de-rolling. There are specific techniques to process the audition, release the story and character, and safely re-enter your day. But no one told me about that, so a lot of shit lingered. Whether I showed it or not, I absorbed the stories, the characters' experiences, even their language. I visited these places in my mind and in my heart, and I didn't forget them. I couldn't separate what was mine or the characters. Remember, my brain literally couldn't separate reality from fantasy. Had I learned safer methods of getting into and out of character, I might not carry some of the emotional scars that I've gained through portraying characters as a child. There's a specific gruesome false memory I created after I was coached for an audition where the character's mother dies, and I was told to pretend my real mother was dying as a way to make myself cry. I didn't ever tell my mom this because I thought it could really hurt her. But after that audition, I returned to this image a number of times for characters with similar stories, feeling gutted and tormented, usually needing to escalate the imagery to keep it potent and hurtful. So now just think about Disney films like Bambi, Lion King, Tarzan, Tangled, Frozen, Cinderella, Snow White, Lilo and Stitch, Little Mermaid, Princess and the Frog, Mulan. I could go on. What do these kid films have in common? Dead parents. So, just because you're working on kids' shows doesn't mean there aren't mature themes, and lots of kids are auditioning for stories back to back with these themes. On that note, let's mention how many auditions contain some form of explicit or mature theme. Dramatic events, lewd behavior, cursing. Movies are full of intense scenes, and as a child, if I'm reenacting this, or even just pretending to witness it, I'm enrolling myself in that experience as if it's real. So after I released my op-ed, I received this message from a mother who had a little one who was maybe 2 or 3 years old, and the little one booked a role, and they knew that the rest of the film might have some horror, but they didn't think that the little one was going to be subjected to it directly. Well, on set, things changed, they were surprised, and suddenly the little kid had to not only be around the scary killer, but also interact with them in harmful ways. And thereafter, the kid froze and was terrified, not only of the other actor, but also of showing up to this place that was supposed to be fun. And the mom said, "My kid is clinging to my side and refuses to let go of my hand and won't go to sleep alone. And we have to go back to this set and I don't know what to do. I want to protect them. I wasn't expecting this. And now my kid is traumatized." And so, I'm not a licensed therapist. So I said, listen, as human to human, here are some helpful ways to help create a sense of safety with your child again and reassure them that you're right there, that you'll advocate for them. And also, here's how you might be able to bring something up to production, but sometimes stuff happens and it's too late. The damage has been done. And I just think about that little one, how they were showing up to do a fun job and then it literally became a nightmare. So keep this in mind every time you see a child on camera in an intense or mature situation. Even just having their first kiss or talking about sex or wearing something kind of sexy. Kids aren't always ready for what's asked of them and what's encouraged by adults in the production team. The next effect of auditioning is the impact of being typecast. Each audition, you see the character's traits written on a character breakdown, and you realize that your team and casting see you as a fit for certain things. So I was often submitted for roles described as unconventionally pretty, girl next door, quirky, smart but wounded, tomboy, and sarcastic. And all of these things were things I could pull off, but I learned after a few years that even if I wanted to play beautiful, ditzy, sexy, powerful, feminine, edgy, I was pretty much automatically written off. Typecasting is such a mindfuck for an adult, let alone a child who's still forming their identity. To this day, I have fragments of my self-concept that originated from character breakdowns. And beyond the character breakdown, you also become typecast for the kinds of projects you're going to book. Are you a film kid or a TV kid? A main character or a supporting character? Films, especially dramas, are, or at least used to be, viewed as higher art than TV shows. So when my agent submitted Dakota Fanning and I on the same parts, and she booked the movies and I booked the TV shows, I felt inferior within our agency. Further, I was often typecast as number 2 or number 3 on the call sheet. Not quite the lead, supporting, meaning my characters existed to move the lead character's story forward. To be positioned in such a specific way and then glued to it as a kid is pretty much the opposite of supporting genuine self-expression and development. I had a constant war within myself, trying to prove I was more dimensional than my latest silly kid show, only to be rewarded when I stayed inside the box. To this day, I distinctly remember booking a Disney show and my agent saying, okay, now if you say yes to this and you decide to go the Disney route, just know you might have a great career now, but no longevity. But on the bright side, you'll have more age-appropriate jobs with other kids, and you might be able to start working sooner. I really felt the dilemma, and I didn't even know if acting was something I wanted to do forever, but I decided to go the wholesome family entertainment route, hoping that I could prove myself worthy of other job opportunities along the way. Still, my self-concept and being typecast really did a number, especially being famous for specific personality traits and physical appearances. As I got older and started considering my own power and voice, I remember one instance where I decided to not go on the audition, just as a statement to myself that I didn't have to believe these words were my truth. It was for a lead role, which was amazing, but guess what the character was? The Duff. The dumb, ugly, fat friend. The aftermath of auditioning and booking certain roles really has a profound impact. There's actual research that shows young performers who got to work in film over television became better adjusted adults, namely due to film being perceived as a higher status, more credible art form, as well as the process of production allowing them to settle into one character for a longer period, as opposed to auditioning for short guest star roles on TV shows. With the exception of series regulars on TV, most bookings are for short shoots, and then you're right back out auditioning again, and the cumulative stress over time has negative effects on the child. To give you a window into my own psyche, auditions shaped me in a few additional ways. Because auditions require the actor to put themselves through the ringer repeatedly just to win over strangers, I became a master people pleaser. I was hypervigilant and attuned to others' needs and on and ready all the time, for better and worse. I can read rooms and people very attentively. And these days, I have to proactively chill out and remind myself I'm not trying to win over people. I can just be. But that only started taking root once I stopped auditioning several years ago. And if I haven't already named this, it's really odd that as a response to our vulnerability on auditions, we'll mostly be rejected. We give you our all, and you mostly say nope. There's no holding space from the casting director. It's not two-way vulnerability. You're on your own to get out of character and move forward without taking any of this personally. And on the rare occasion that we book the role, it's still odd to me that the reward involves creating dramatic and emotional scenes in our mind and body. It's so strange for a kid who doesn't know what's going on already. Research shows that kids who feel like their decision to perform was self-determined at least have higher rates of enjoying the process. But for kids who don't feel like they chose this for themselves, they tend to interpret this process as stressful. And auditioning is most of their professional experience. I think the last thing I'll name for now is a lot of really, really, really talented people have had dozens of almosts in their career. So many talented performers have almost been your favorite action hero, your favorite comedian, your favorite leading lady. And you get to see the select few who make it, but there have been millions of other performers over the years who won't. And for some of them, a life of almosts is corrosive to the spirit. It steals years from your life. It ruins your mental health and relationships because you're chasing some big break in a future that won't happen. I don't mean this pessimistically. I mean that as a means to really check in and ask yourself, what's driving you and what are you willing to risk and sacrifice when you get into the industry? Let me tell you, after 15 years of so many almosts, I was over it. I have other skills and interests in this life, and the world is so big. Why would I trap myself in this any longer? When I see Oscar winners telling young artists to keep going no matter what, knowing I thought I was going to get an Oscar someday, I now know that that isn't the best advice for me. My life is so much better, healthier, and more meaningful now that I don't bend over backwards day in and day out to audition for roles written by other people, funded by networks with slanted agendas, for roles that'll likely go to name actors and leave the rest of us pining for a chance. Roles that pigeonhole you into a certain personality on projects that hardly pay enough to survive. No, I'm not about to romanticize the dream. I much prefer the power that has come from taking control of my destiny. On that note of self-empowerment, I also now look at acting jobs and I'm like, how did I not recognize that I was pouring out my soul and giving my body for this project, but never even had any ownership of the material? I always understood that actors were hired to bring to life someone else's story. And, I found that to be such a gift, right? It's an act of service. You're bringing to life this person's artistic vision. Yet, as I got older, I started to recognize that the people creating and financing films also have their own specific beliefs, motivations, perhaps even agendas, whether there's a certain political undertone or societal commentary. And instead of just focusing on the arduous audition process and trying to get hired, I had some kind of ethical question about what projects I even wanted to support and what impact they'd have on viewers. Now, I was in a privileged enough position to be selective in this way. Many actors have to take whatever they can get if they want to make it. But now that I've produced my own content, I've written my own material, I've owned my narrative, considered the impact on audiences, it would take a lot for me to go back to trying to earn casting directors' approval for a job that I don't technically even believe in. I know not every actor wants to wear the other hats of writer, director, producer, so oftentimes the only path involves lots of auditions. But just know that the assumption that actors have a lot of power is really often a misconception. Unless you're an A-lister, you're not really choosing the jobs you audition for or work on. So if I could summarize the aftermath of auditioning on my personal development, it would be the audition process made it really hard to find my authentic self. I'm glad I'm out of it, but as you're listening, I'm just curious, what stands out to you about the audition process? What's something you think could be improved? Comment your thoughts. And I'd also like to know, when it comes to your own life, considering the themes of being a chameleon, dealing with rejection, people pleasing, how have these shaped your personal development? What has your experience been like finding your authentic self? So take some deep breaths and digest this all. Next week, we're going to finally look at the parents and families who choose this for their child. What are they thinking? And is it possible to even do this without really messing up your kid? We'll see. See you then. On the next episode, they think it's so cool that they're in a movie, yet later on, when your child wants to apply for college, they didn't actually get the mandatory curriculum covered. Ask me how I know this.